Check, check. Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to Win Within Sangha. I think it's about time we get some workshops started. We'll be live streaming this whole thing tonight. It's going to be lovely, archived on YouTube. You'll be able to see it on our Facebook page. All of these lovely things. Let's give a special hand to all the guests that we have showing up so far. What's up? Anybody? Any hands? There we go. There's some hands. All right. So in a couple minutes, we're going to have Patrick Moore come up and talk about sustainable hemp, cannabis hemp, sustainability personified, discussing how hemp can be used to amend soils and as a agricultural and textile input that, as we know, can save the world, right? Come on, can I get a hell yeah from someone? All right, everyone's alive in this room? This microphone's on, you can hear me? Hello? All right, just checking. Excellent. In a second, if anyone wants to reach out to their people on Facebook, on Twitter, once again, this is live streaming. My name is Phil Frazier. Hello, how you doing? And welcome to Win Within Sangha. Oh yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we're going to start these workshops up. Our first speaker for the night is Patrick Moore, CHT. I don't even know what the abbreviation means, but there it is. Discussing cannabis, hemp, and sustainability personified. Take it away, Patrick.
Greetings. Mic check. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. I am Patrick Moore, CHT. That stands for Certified Hypnotherapist, because I'm radical in so many ways. And the radical solution in mathematics is the quickest point from A to B. So the irony that radicals have been cast in the shadow of being something less than just being efficient problem solvers. And I find that the mind-body link in medicine is really the quickest way to address health, and specialized in hypnotherapy. Today I'm speaking about my other passion in life, cannabis hemp and cannabis sativa. I know it's something many of us hold very close to our hearts, and yet I find, like so many things, the further in I go, the bigger it gets. And the story of cannabis hemp is much more than the story of a sacred medicine. It's much more than the story of an important fiber source. It is the link to humanity. It is the missing link in the 20th century. In all my study of cannabis hemp, and I am wearing it from head to toe, ate it in each of my meals today. I have a 1980s Mercedes-Benz, and I run it on cannabis hemp oil. Of all of those, I find that the eating of hemp to be the most important point, and so I'm really going to emphasize that at the beginning here. There is a school of anthropology forming a scientific premise that 80% of the human diet for the last 50,000 years has been hemp seed. that we are an exclusively hemp-eating species that substituted 20% of its diet with beans and berries and fish and whatever it could catch along the way. But the staple diet for humans was hemp seed and had been for 50,000 years. And I think that explains the endocannabinoid system that's been identified in the last 20 years. The scientists have been really shocked to find, again, the closer in you look, the bigger it gets, that we don't have a few receptors for cannabis in our body. Our body is covered. Our nervous system, our brain, our frontal lobe is covered with receptors for cannabis. And there's 2 other plants in the world that kind of trigger those, I think almost on accident. Turmeric's one of them. But our history and our link with cannabis goes back to our beginnings of, again, we'll take it back 50,000 years, when we chose it as our exclusive food source. And then from there, the eating of cannabis seeds that had some flower still on it. It was only 20 years ago I was getting hemp seed bars that said, these hemp seeds are still have a little bit of THC and might make your test positive. So tell your PO officer you're eating hemp seed bars. So from 20 years ago to 50,000 years ago, no one was able to remove 100% of the cannabis flower from the hemp seed that we ate 3 meals a day, all day, every day, all of humanity. It is the one plant that has survived all the plagues, all the pestilence, all the locusts. At the end of the day, the hemp plant's still the one surviving. And so it was the thing we learned, we evolved to live on exclusively. Gautama Buddha teaches that he lived on hemp seeds alone for 6 years before he became the Buddha. I mean, these aren't minor teachings amongst some of the great people in history who emphasize the importance of hemp in ways that sound like Jack Hare does today. There's a new generation of people that are waking up to this passion, and they've ostracized the movement and they've made it criminal, but it's still the leaders of our culture trying to bring us back to the most basic and salient truths. We are hemp eaters. Until we get that back into the center point of our diet, we will not be healthy. If you today were to take a panda, a koala bear, or any of the species in the world that's one food specific, but take the koala bear. If you were to take a koala bear today and capture it in Australia, take it home and feed it a bunch of other things besides eucalyptus leaves, you would go to jail. You would be found to be cruel and unusual punishment to an animal. If you take an animal and you said, but I fed him some dog food, and I fed him, I put a fish there, and I gave him some berries, and I even put a couple other types of leaves there. But yeah, I guess I've heard that the koala bear only eats eucalyptus leaves. That would be a crime. And yet culture has done that to humanity for over 100 years. It's taken away our single most important food source, and then it's written off a myriad of 1,000 diseases now in the last 100 years as being somehow our fault. It's all genetic. It's all the lack of pharmaceutical drugs or the lack of radiation, apparently. This is the greatest scam in humanity, and there have been many of them through the years. If you look back at the bubonic plague, it took Europe 100 years to create an environment rich enough to create the bubonic plague. First, they banned bathing. You couldn't wash your hands. And then they banned the eating with utensils. So you couldn't use utensils. You had to eat with your hands. And then they killed all the dogs and cats. So the rats would actually start running amok. It took just 3 or 4 generations to get Europe prime enough to lose 1/3 of the population to the bubonic plague. We've been set up the same way, except what's never been able to happen in the history of the world was to take us away from our food source, hemp. Because I go back just 100 years, and then back for 1,500 years in Europe, and they called hemp seed gruel. Gruel. We've all heard that before. If you've read Dickens or Shakespeare or Chaucer or pretty much any person who's studied European history has always mentioned that the peasants, the lived in the villages, were hemp. They ate gruel morning, noon, and night, and while the princes and kings ate pheasant. Well, gruel is hemp seed as much as oatmeal's oats. So the way peasants ate in Europe 1,000 years ago, I still can't afford to eat that way today in California. I have to order my hemp seed from Canada, and it's freezed in these 5-pound bags, and the amount it would cost me to do an 80% hemp seed diet has always been a little bit out of my grasp, is impractical in my situation. I am working hard, and I've spent the last 3.5 years as my primary job in the world is to make sure California has access to industrial hemp in 2016. And I spent 8 years in Guatemala doing a relief project with Mayan Indians during the 90s, giving them hemp textiles to make clothes out of, and supplying superfoods and colloidal silver and ozone. And so I learned about 2012 a long time ago, early 90s. And I thought 2012 was going to be our galactically lined up point to create what I believe is the introduction to the age of Aquarius. They keep telling me we're in a transition period right now between two eras, and we are on the dawning of a new age, the age of Aquarius. And I find it no small comfort that tonight is the full moon in Aquarius. And so as we were talking about what it takes to crescent in a new age under a full moon, out of Pisces into Aquarius, I see it as we need our food back. And then on the backside of the food is the fuel. Like I say, I have a Mercedes-Benz. I run it on hemp oil as Rudolf Diesel intended. And then out from there, of course, we can quit cutting down the trees. We can shut down these nuclear disasters that are happening all over the world. We can really sidestep most of the world's trouble and sorrow is embedded in the fact that we took the one thing that connected us to nature like nothing else, and we didn't hide it. We banned it. We demonized it. People in the world today scared of it, calling it the devil's weed. And yet it is the reason we suffer the way we do today, this lack of this plant. In California, I was part of Prop 215. I was a kid out in this life when nobody even knew that medical and marijuana went together. We take it for granted right now. With the greatest weapon of the 20th century, a ballot initiative in California. We don't need rocket launchers. We don't need the Molotov cocktails. I need a pen and a piece of paper in California, and I can make law. And when I did that, when I helped that process in 1995, I realized I can not only make law, I can change history. Because now there's hardly a person on this planet. And I suspect in the furthest corners of this planet, you went out, you find people who'd heard about medical marijuana and this thing happening in California with marijuana. And it's kind of like an evolution, and it's kind of like a revolution, but it's something totally different because it's taking back our power and it's reminding us of who and what we really were before Babylon started feeding us petroleum. And I mean that quite literally. The first product put out by the AMA was a bottle of crude petroleum with mercury in it. 100 years later, everything the AMA puts out has crude petroleum in it and mercury. So we've had a scam pulled on us that is so massive and yet so interlinked to one simple little plant. And it's a plant that we aren't supposed to know about right now. Babylon's plan was by 1950s, maybe the 1970s, we wouldn't even know what cannabis was. They were going to erase it. There's more excitement and energy around the cannabis plant than almost anything. I used to wait 2 or 3 months for the next story to come out in mainstream media about cannabis so I could promote that as this wave and this evolution that's coming. Today, if I don't spend the entire day on the internet, I can't tell you what happened yesterday in cannabis news. That's how big it is. That's how powerful this evolution is. And again, the closer you go, the bigger it gets. So I'm getting very excited here in California when I signed up in 2011 to support the most realistic and recognizable initiative on the planet, the Jack Herer Initiative. I'm sure we mostly know who Jack Herer is, but he's a pioneer in the cannabis movement who wrote a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. It's the centerpiece of the shirt I'm wearing tonight. It's The Emperor Wears No Clothes, the center of the temple that goes along with the movement of hemp. And but he spent much more time working on this initiative. It's a simple 2-page ballot initiative, but it has more power behind it than thousands of pages of muck coming out of the ASA and NORML and MVP and the DPA. There are 4 major legalization movements in California, and they've all sold us down the river. And over the last 5 or 10 years, they've all actually become run by the same group of people. So the 4 distinct voices and what legalization should look like in California has become one monotone corporate voice saying you could maybe have 6 plants, and if we catch you with maybe an ounce, maybe 2, you won't get in trouble. But if we catch you with 3, you're in trouble again. When we catch you with 10 plants, you're in a lot of trouble. We catch you competing with us and the corporate cannabis, the Marlboro Greens, and this corporate wave of cannabis that inevitably is going to happen. But the key is, does it happen without competition, or do they have to compete with the cannabis culture that's in the world today? The cannabis culture that's held on by its nails, by the hair of its chinny chin chin. We've kept cannabis growing on this planet for 100 years during a war on cannabis. And now they're going to try to take it away from us at the golden moment and say, no, if you want to put legal seed in the ground, it's going to be $4 or $5 million before you put one legal seed in the ground in California. They took away all the medical rights up in Oregon and Washington already. Their form of legal is they can no longer grow cannabis after over 12 years of being able to grow it as patients. So don't think what we have can't be taken away. Don't think couldn't be dragged backwards, because ASA, NORML, the Drug Policy Alliance, and the Marijuana Policy Project are working very hard to take away most of the things we recognize about medical marijuana right now. More importantly, to make sure you never eat hemp seeds on a regular basis in your life again. Because as long as they can keep us from having the essential fatty acids we need to build our body, we will always have a health problem. It's like running your car on something other than what it's supposed to run on. My Mercedes-Benz will run 4 times as long on my hemp oil blend as it would on petroleum. So like my car, I plan on living 4 times as long as the communities around me that are not eating the fuel source they're actually supposed to have in the center part of their diet. And any expert in the world, including Dr. Udo, he's maybe recognized as the top expert in the world in essential fatty acids. He's got a blend called Udo's blend. He's been working on for 20 years to create the perfect human blend, because there's nothing more important to the human body than essential fatty acids, 3, 6, and 9 in particular. And they have to be in a certain ratio or they don't work right. A lot of people who adopted flax oil as the solution to their essential fatty acid problems developed a whole series of diseases and problems. It's that intricate. It's that important of a key to understand the essential fatty acids we need. But once you do, you realize it's very simple, basically. It's a 3-to-1 ratio with a couple of the oils. So Udo put together a 7-oil blend that he considers to be the ultimate medicine for treating the body and essential fatty acids. I mentioned at the end of the lecture, well, how was it anybody evolved on that oil? Because none of those oils are produced any one place in the world. And he admitted, oh, I've just recreated hemp oil. Hemp oil is the oil we've evolved on for 100,000 years, and it's why we have this necessity, this deep necessity to have this essential fatty oil blend in our diet every day, or things start to die, or things start to shrivel up in our brain, or our nervous system, or our spine. It does not work properly without the 3-to-1 ratio of essential fatty acids. It's clear and simple. It may be the most salient health point of the 20th century, because it's the thing we've been denied, and it's the last thing they ever give us to treat us. I mean, they will 100 radical therapies before anybody goes back and says, hey, maybe you should look at the essential fatty acids your body's supposed to have. So he admitted he's recreating hemp oil, and 20 years ago there was no source of hemp oil in the world he could count on, so he had this almond oil, olive oil blend. That's the key. That's the simple side effect of legalizing cannabis in California in a way that empowers all of us to have it. The Jack Garrett Initiative, besides freeing all the pot prisoners in the state, which that alone I think would have rallied an army in the last 3 years. If we could actually right the wrong and actually get our friends back. We all think we are a step or two away from doing time in California for growing cannabis or selling cannabis or having too much cannabis. So we start by freeing all the pot prisoners and expunging their records so they can go back to being teachers or truck drivers or whatever they were before they became narcotics felons. But more importantly, we set people up with a basic right to grow 99 plants and have 12 pounds on them. That's your rose garden. That's your tomato garden. 99 plants and 12 pounds. With 20 plants, you could grow enough cannabis medicine for a family of 4. With the other 80 plants, you can grow enough hemp seed to feed a family of 4. So your 100 plants just became the equivalent of an earthship of types. You are self-sufficient on this planet with 100 plants growing in your backyard. If Gautama Buddha could live on hemp seeds alone for 6 years, you probably could too. Now, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to become enlightened or turned into the Buddha, but the potential is there to live on hemp seeds alone and to reach states of, extremely good health. Then the most important point in the Jack Hare Initiative, and I would like to really emphasize this here, The single most important point, and I became aware of this several years ago in the Jack Hare Initiative, it's a 2-page initiative, it's an easy read, you'd love it, is it limits the licensing fees at $1,000. So above your 99 plants and 12 pounds, you decide you want to grow 4 acres so you can build a house. You want to start growing 10 acres so you can start building cars. You want to grow 20 acres so you can start feeding a chunk of your community. That would be impressive with 20 acres of well-done hemp in the world today. They can't charge you more than $1,000 to get involved in that business. If that's not in the initiative, behind closed doors, it's going to be in the millions, if not the tens of millions, before you can plant an acre of the safest plant on the planet. And let me just emphasize that as well. As we've really got into the fine-tuning scientific studying of what is toxic and what is not in the 21st century, nothing we have studied in nature proves to be less toxic than cannabis. That is one of those bittersweet ironies in all of this, is there are thousands of herbs out there that you might want to actually protect people from growing wild and crazy with, because they have ways and little toxins and little things in them. The cannabis plant has none of that. And that's how you get back to this 50,000-year cycle of living on this as our primary food, but then also all of our fiber, all of our houses, all of our paper, the earliest papers, all the papers up until the 1900s. Nobody's ever cut down a tree to make paper through history. That would be sick. They've used the most abundant and renewable resource on the planet. I haven't mentioned, and again, I'm sorry because it's really a permaculture expert or focal point tonight. There's a whole 45-minute lecture just on how cannabis hemp feeds the soils. If nothing came out of the cannabis plant, if you're just putting a seed in the ground and at the end of 4 months nothing came up out of the soil, it would be worth a worldwide revolution to reignite and spread this plant around the world solely for what it does to our soil. And soil, as we all know, is the most important step in cannabis freedom and in permaculture, in farming, and what comes out of the soil is the soil. And if we can find a way of mediating and feeding and healing the soil better than hemp, I haven't seen it yet. So the magic of it is truly every direction you put it in, it gives us back something that is so beyond unique. We could prevent the hillsides washing away in Malibu every other year and taking out 20 or 30 houses simply by throwing some hemp seed up on the hillside earlier that season. And the roots grow so fast and thick into the soil that they would hold those hillsides. That is what we've done for 10,000 years. And when we stop it, it has cost us our environment, it has cost us our health, it has cost us our dignity as human beings. Because what have we done to replace that? We have started the mass slaughter of animals in a way that's never been thought of or conceived in human history. We have fought myriads of wars, the First World War, Second World War, and a myriad of wars since, to give us petroleum to run our cars that should be running on hemp oil locally produced for 40 cents a gallon. That's what we've always had around us, and we've allowed that to be taken away by a very small group of people. And I think you could start with Texas and Saudi Arabia and trying to find out who some of those people are, because it's from my understanding from Helen Caldicott, it may be too late already. She gave an update 3 or 4 months ago, and she's, I believe, the top expert in the world in the true study of nuclear science. And she says we've crossed a point. We crossed the Rubicon with Fukushima 3 or 4 months ago, and she gave up. She might not ever come out and speak to us again. So that's how close we are. I'm not of that school necessarily. Still believe that there's hope, and we could take a sharp left turn at any moment here and give ourselves a different world. I believe it's so quick and easy in the next 20 or 30 years. I believe it is in our lifetime, in our generation, that we could shut down every nuclear power plant on the world. Surround them with what? What would you plant around a nuclear power plant that was melting down and endangering the community around it? Hemp! Yes! That's it. It is the greatest phytoremediating plant on the planet. On top of everything else, it eats nuclear radiation and makes it inert, makes it safe. So not only could we have used it to prevent the problem, we can use hemp to phytoremediate not only nuclear, but petroleum. And the acids and the bizarre metals used in steel smelting. There are holes around the world where we've dug up hundreds of tons of ore so we can make steel. Henry Ford made hemp stronger than steel 100 years ago. We could have had hemp space shuttles. It's not like there's a single thing on the planet we've done that we couldn't have done on hemp for 1/50th the cost, 1/100th the environmental impact, and we'd be proud of it. It would be a world we could be proud of handing off to our children. I'm embarrassed to try to explain to children what's happening in the world today and how quickly we got to this point. And I believe it is up to us in this era, in this generation, in these next 2 years in California to ensure we have a chance to grow industrial hemp and that each one of us has that opportunity. Because there's a part of me that presents the Jack Herer Initiative, and I've done dozens of interviews in radio and TV, and I'm one of the spokespeople for this movement. There's a part of me that usually presents forward a very strong image of hemp replacing most of the industrial economy that we have today, how quick and easy we could be building houses and cars, and they've got these beautiful little hemp Vespas in Amsterdam right now I'm very jealous about. The Germans jumped on hemp 15 years ago, as did Canada. So we're following quickly behind what is becoming the green revolution of the 21st century, hemp production. A third of all Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and BMWs are made out of hemp right now. 1/3 of all the 2014 Mercedes-Benz, Audis, and BMWs are 1/3 hemp right now. So on the last note, there's so many ups and downs in this journey, and I try to, I'm keeping positive because I know what our potential is, but I'm a little heartbroken by how we've let this situation get to this point. In 2012, we decided to do, as we were always encouraged to by Jack Herer, to keep the initiative relevant and timely, to review it again and see if there are things we needed to add. And I've just been part of the Occupy movement, and we had just done a large march against Monsanto, and we scared Monsanto so bad they haven't quite recouped from that one yet. And I insisted on adding a ban on genetically engineered cannabis into the Jack Herer Initiative for the state of California. I got a little bit of blowback from that. Like maybe I was getting too involved in these other fringe things. I needed to keep on point about what was real in cannabis and what our real concerns were in cannabis. Regardless, we got it added to the Jack Herer Initiative. So the Jack Herer Initiative, as well as many other beautiful points, bans genetically engineered cannabis in California. And on my daily quest to keep up with what's happening in cannabis around the world, you can't overlook the fact that Uruguay has just legalized cannabis. You've all heard that, right? Uruguay is legalizing cannabis and leading the world towards this place we all know we're heading towards now, legalization. Legalization, everybody calls it that, but let's really talk about what it is. Uruguay legalized cannabis. And I watched it. I watched the president give a press conference, the first one. Not only is it going to be legal in Uruguay, it's all going to be sold by the government. So you know it'll be safe. About a couple months later, he comes out with a press conference and says, it's not only going to be legal, it's going to be sold by the government, but it's going to be $1 a gram. Well, right there, you know there's a man who doesn't know anything about cannabis because there are many grades of cannabis and many different prices. So a couple months after that, just recently, another press conference, he says, not only is it going to be $1 a gram and legal, it's going to be tax-free because my buddy here is really paying for the whole thing. And him and I came up with a way to where it suits all of us. And so now we can pretty much just give it away tax-free. This is my buddy here with Monsanto. He's agreed to put a genetic chip, marker they call it. He's agreed to put a genetic marker in all the legal cannabis we sell here in Uruguay. That way we'll be able to identify it as it leaves the country through routes of trafficking. And we'll be able to identify it from the underground cannabis, the black market cannabis, which is everybody in Uruguay who I think for a minute thought, wow, great, it's legal, I'm legal, we won. And then they find out, no, it's only Monsanto designed, government sanctioned herb for $1 a gram that's legal. Everyone else is bigger criminal than they've ever been in the history of growing cannabis in Uruguay. So don't be fooled by the slogans. Please, I implore everybody, this is the rest of our lives. We're going to deal with what happens in California in the next 2 years globally for the rest of our lives. If we understand the details, if we can really embrace the fact that simple legalization, If you can't understand everything in an initiative, you shouldn't support it. If you can't really get behind the principles of a ballot initiative, if you can't really get into the idea that we're freeing all the pot prisoners, we're making sure everybody can have access to cannabis, we're making sure Monsanto doesn't just roll in here and create something that is not safe or productive or even necessarily cannabis, then stay out of the fight. You know, if your idea of just supporting cannabis movement is just sending a check to Normal or ASA, stop that at least, because it's just, or do the research. Right now, Don Duncan's in Sacramento trying to pass 1262 Senate bill, and it'll take away 80% of what we have right now. It'll make it impossible for most doctors to write a note. And the medical marijuana in California, it could start Monday morning, because Don Duncan's been up there spreading around hundreds of thousands of dollars with a team of people all wearing $5,000 suits. Not one of them made out of hemp. So there it is. There's the two sides of the coin. We got the Jack Hare Initiative, which is us and personified, us incarnate, and we got a clear corporate takeover of cannabis that if it goes, you know, what are we going to be telling kids down the road? Don't smoke that cannabis. Keep away from that cannabis. They got formaldehyde in there. It's genetically engineered. It's got, what are they going to do? They're going to put pig DNA in the cannabis someday. We must not let that be the future of cannabis. If that's 2 years down the road, I want to go back 20 years. I want to go back to the healthy underground. I want to go back to, you know, we can't get back to 200 years where everything was made out of hemp, but at least I want to go back to a time where I know my hemp isn't genetically engineered by Monsanto. So are there any questions before I wrap this up? It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everyone's time. I guess I covered all. Oh, yes, please. Certainly, no, we have won the cultural war. That's the irony of it right now. Is I remember when Murphy Brown smoked the first joint on mainstream TV, the last season of Murphy Brown, I think it was 92 or 3 or 4 or something, and she had cancer and she got a joint and she smoked it, and I'd never seen that on TV before. Now it's hard to find a show where somebody doesn't spark a joint at least once during that hour. So we have, you know, there are stragglers, there are fringe movements out there that just haven't quite come around yet, but the vast majority of the people right now support the cannabis movement as they understand it. Then each step, it's much easier now to take that next step and be like, hey, have you used the hemp shampoos yet? You know, have you tried the hemp body care products? All of it, most of it good. There are companies right now making hemp stuff and they mix it with petroleum and they put their little flap of mercury in there, and you know, it's going to get like that too, and we can't stop that per se. I'd like to, you know, parts of me would like to stop that, but that's not my principle in law. My principle in law is to make sure we all have equal access, equal and fair access, and that's the battle cry for the Jack Hare Initiative. Equal and fair access to hemp. We all know it's the new $1 trillion crop. I've got it tallied up at about $30 trillion a year for the state of California. $30 trillion a year for the state of California in hemp potentials once we get our industry settled in, which just takes a few years with hemp. This isn't rocket science. We aren't splitting the atom. We're going back to what we've been doing for 5,000 years and doing it with 21st century technology. We got ultrasonic retting now. The hardest thing about the hemp plant is it grows 16 feet tall, and it is so strong that's hard to get to those fibers inside. And it would take months and months and a physical man-hour breaking apart the herds to get to it, or leaving it in the field and like those teepees all tied up, letting nature break it down for a full season or two. Today you can put it in ponds and blast it with a little ultrasonic sound, and the things just break apart. It's like a rife machine for industrial hemp. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, as soon as we get this going, we got hemp cars we can build. We got things that are going to overshadow this weird little idea that somehow getting high on this weed that makes food taste better, makes music sound better, is something worse than alcohol. I think we'll find a culture that's really starting to switch over and recognize what cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin have done to our culture, along with the Ritalin and the Prozacs and then the alcohol. That's a whole thing in our culture, and cannabis stands out from that as far away as hemp fuel stands away from petroleum. As far away as the, you know, eating some genetically engineered meal away from eating hemp seeds. Each of these steps is so distinct and intangible. So the best way we have to overcome stigma and really at this point superstitions about cannabis is to have our facts down. Like I say, I could spend an entire day, all day, every day, just keeping up with what's being published and researched, just keeping up with the medical science coming out of Europe, and to some degree, even America today, starting to do research in the CBDs and THCA, and there's 60 different cannabinoids that have been discovered that each have receptors in our body. I mean, we got 100 years of catching up with how we are an endocannabinoid, being separated from our endocannabinoids. And when that synergy happens again, it's going to be the rare soul that still clings to this idea that there's something wrong with cannabis. As it always has been. I mean, the stigma, the reason the media is so important for world domination and control is because it's all they got. They've always tried to perpetuate the idea that the majority have gone along with these ideas, and yet they've kept us so separated and isolated that we've never been able to get around that. But I think it's always been the 80 or 90% of us that knew what was going on and felt like we were the minority. Yes.
You mentioned something about Uruguay.
Yes, Uruguay. This was announced less than 2 months ago. Yeah, so this has happened right now, and yet it is history. It has been announced, and there are people in Uruguay smoking a weed that has been designed and made by Monsanto and would be banned here in California if we can create a proper piece of legislation. And again, I don't know what the long-term solution is in that. I know through most of Europe, as they've actually done the research, especially in Eastern Europe, as they've actually done the research, they then ban Monsanto from producing this food again. Many countries have banned Monsanto from doing business in their country again. And then many of them have gone to the fields where these things are growing, quarantined them, and set fire to them with either like military or like flamethrowers. And in my head, that stands as a most realistic response to Monsanto in the world today. If I were king, if we actually could get together and come up with a unified voice, that would be the solution quickly to the problem. The same thing they have done to cannabis for 100 years around the world, flying out of helicopters with machetes and guns. We could flip that on Monsanto and actually have this stuff erased from the planet in a year or two. So, yeah, I mean, it was helpful for both of you guys. I mean, I think, any other questions? Yes? Right. No, that's really left up to the growers as a type of libertarian approach to legalization. The less we tell people what to do and how to do it, the less problems you create. And the irony of we were running against an initiative 2 years ago called the MCLR, as control, regulate, tax, and dominate, as this whole thing. And it started out as 4 pages when I first met them. Then by the time they sent it in, it was 37 pages. I could never make it through that full version, but I knew within a page I didn't like it, right? But it was terrifying to think about how some people think, well, more is better, and they're going to sit there and like put everything in. Once you do that, you start giving the interpretation of law between judges and lawyers. You don't give them that. Simple. People used to read the 215 and they're like, that's not a law. That's like 1 page. We're like, exactly. That'll make it a great law. And 16 years later, there's still 1,500 clubs running in California. And they try every year to stop it and pull them back and stop and pull them back. But the law supports them. It's the only initiative in America that said, hey, you can smoke cannabis where you smoke tobacco. So even with 2 states that they say are 100% legal, we're still the only state where you can smoke in a park or walking down the street or anywhere. So again, these are the salient, those are the details we pegged. We made sure that they can't pass a DUI test that tests for random cannabinoids like Washington State did. Because Washington State made it legal, and then they said 0.5 nanograms of any cannabinoid, and you're a felon behind the wheel. let you know 5 nanograms is in your body 3 or 4 weeks after you smoke your last joint. So everybody in the state of Washington who smokes at least a joint a month is now a felon behind the wheel because, and that was a people's initiative. That's the same thing. People wrote that, voted for that. No senators, no governor, nobody involved. There are only 11 states that can do that. And it is the thing that's made the West Coast the West Coast. Is every decade since 1911, we've done a few things that Sacramento and the governor never would. And right now, the biggest push in Sacramento is to end the ballot initiative process because we are making life so hard for the corporate takeover of our state. And so this may be, again, this is a turning point in history on so many levels. If we use the ballot initiative to seize back the new $30 trillion crop, I guarantee we will keep the ballot initiative process, right? So again, we lock ourselves in very distinctly here. A road forks. Oh, my pleasure, of course. No, the road forks in 2016. And we're going to choose one path, one or the other. It's very clear. They told me they got $23 million and they're going to squish me and us in 2016. So there's going to be a ballot initiative passed in the state, and it's either one that frees us or it's one that makes us legal consumers of a corporate product we're going to be embarrassed to call cannabis in 5 or 10 years. I love you guys. I appreciate the help on this. Hemp, hemp, hooray! Hemp, hemp, hooray!
Let's give it up for Patrick Moore one more time. For all those that are listening to this live streaming, this is now on YouTube being archived, so we're creating at least a record of what we're doing here to discuss these topics and continue this communication on as we pass this out to communities and they get a better understanding of what we're trying to do here. Once again, welcome to Win Within Sangha. How's everybody doing? Got some food in you? All right. So we've got a speaker that's going to come up and talk briefly about the Keegan water that he brought and tell us a little about alkalinity and how to keep our own bodies in a state of perpetual readiness. Your name once again? Jerry Robin.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So Taryn asked me, middle of this afternoon, could I come and bring some Kangen water? So I didn't bring any visual aids. I'm just going to speak from the heart. All right. Now, so I know who I'm talking about or talking to. Who before today has heard of Kangen water? Okay, great. And also, how many people drink bottled water? Come on, I saw some bottled water. Okay. So, why do you drink bottled water? Portability. Anything else? Cleanliness. Okay, anything else about bottled water? No? Okay, so portability. First of all, I've used the same BHT-free half-gallon plastic bottle for my Kangen water for 3 years now. One bottle, just keep on reusing. So, and that's portable, right? But the main thing about plastic bottled waters is they're just plain old not healthy for you. There is a study done several years ago by the National Resources Defense Council that gathered together 1,000 bottles of bottled water, 10 samples, 10 bottles each of 100 different brands from all over the country. And they put them through all sorts of tests. And they found that 25% of the bottles, 250 of those bottles, had arsenic or carcinogenic compounds in the bottled water. 20% of the bottled water had bacteria levels above anything even remotely safe. And 20% of the bottles had industrial compounds like phthalate and benzene and toluene, things that are used in making those plastic bottles. So if you think bottled water is safer than tap water, it's not so. And they also found that 40% of the samples were nothing more than bottled water, nothing more than tap water put into bottles. And you're paying a lot more than per gallon for those bottled waters. So portability, you can do it on your own. As far as if it's any safer or better for you than tap water, I don't think so. Now, of course, there's things like chlorine and things in the water, so you should filter your water, of course. But the company I work with, Enagic, is the company that makes Kangen water ionizers. It's more than a filter. What Kangen water is your tap water, which, by the way, is federally regulated compared to bottled waters, which are not regulated. And it takes the tap water, first it filters it, and then it ionizes it. It splits the water into two. It splits the acidic part of the water away from the alkaline part. So you're drinking water that's alkaline. But this process also takes some of the hydrogen from the H2O and splits it away and creates a molecular hydrogen gas. That molecular hydrogen gas is super antioxidant. There's no calories involved. It gets right into your system, so it shuts down free radicals. It's much more effective than the antioxidants you might eat. Now, you still have to eat your vegetables and fruits, sorry, because they contain a lot of trace minerals and things that are really good for you. But as far as being an antioxidant, the Kangen water is such a great antioxidant. It just gets right into your system and shuts down free radicals. I mentioned about the acidity versus alkalinity. So many human diseases, things like acid reflux, gout, fibromyalgia, diabetes, I'm sure you know people with conditions like that, they all love an acidic system. And we become acidic, well, we largely do it ourselves because of our typical diet, too much soda, too much coffee, too much red meat and sugary desserts. They all make you very, very acidic. Stress makes you acidic. Just getting older makes you acidic. And that chronic acidosis invites those diseases that love an acid environment. So you could help yourself get balanced and help your body do what was meant to be done naturally and help fight against those diseases if you can become balanced and more to the alkaline side. I run across a lot of people who say, well, hey, I eat a lot of raw fruits and vegetables. Doesn't that make me more alkaline? And yeah, sure, those help to make you alkaline, except our bodies aren't 70% raw spinach. Our bodies are 70% water, right? So why not take good care of the majority of your body, and the rest will fall into place. So being more alkaline, sure, eat your fruits and vegetables, but also drink Kangen water. It's Japanese medical equipment. These machines, which are countertop, small little devices that fit right onto your countertop, go right into your tap. They're made and vetted in Japan, in Osaka, Japan, as medical devices. Now, by the way, there are a lot of cheap knockoffs on the market these days coming from Korea and Taiwan. So a lot of companies say, hey, we do the same thing. They're not medical devices, and it's kind of like comparing a rickety, beat-up old bicycle to a Mercedes. They'll both get you there, but how do you want to get there? And what sort of performance and reliability do you want? So my website is thewaterforhealth.net, TEGWATER, thewaterforhealth.net. There's a ton of information there. In addition to bringing a couple of gallons of Kangen water there and a lot of information that you can pick up about the molecular hydration issue and how that's such a great problem-solving thing for everybody, and how 50 years ago in Japan, doctors knew about this water. And this has been in Japanese hospitals for about 40 years or so. So a lot of great information over there. We live in Pasadena, and I give this water out for free on a trial evaluation basis. So if you're anywhere near Pasadena, pick up my card, and I'm happy to give you some of this water. Once you fall in love with the water, I'm sure you're going to want to purchase one of these units, which last for many years. And they're environmentally better because you're never going to buy a bottled water again. And it's much better to drink right from the machine, right on demand. In addition to the drinking water and cooking water that this makes, just briefly, this machine, you can dial in the pH. So you can dial in a pH that's 2.5 pH. 2.5 pH is very, very acidic, but the water from this machine that's 2.5 ionized water can kill germs. So it kills salmonella, E. coli, listeria. In Japanese hospitals, they spray it onto topical MRSA and it kills the MRSA. So it's good for things like eczema, psoriasis, athlete's foot, topically used. It kills all those things. The other side of it, the very, very high alkaline 11.5 water that this machine creates, can emulsify oil. So if you soak fruits and vegetables in that water for a few minutes, it can strip off the oil-based pesticides. The speaker before me was talking about a return to origin. Kangen in Japanese roughly means return to origin, and what they're trying to do is get water back to how it was originally before all our modern needing to protect the infrastructure, the city pipes from the water, to keep the pipes from so they won't get bad. Instead, they're making the water so unless we treat it after it comes out of the tap, like through Kangen water, it's going to not be so good for us. We don't need all that chlorine in our system. Anyway, thewaterforhealth.net, do try some Kangen water over there. And do you have any questions? Yes. Right. We were talking about that before. So this water is awesome for plants. There's so many plants that like an acidic environment. So because you can make an acidic water from this, that's great for plants. There's some, depending on what you're doing with plants, like hydrangeas, depending on the pH of the soil, they can be either pink or purple. So you can use that for different plants. There are a lot of native plants that are more like an alkaline soil. That's great water for that. One of the main uses for this technology, before they discovered it was so good for people in Japan, was in agriculture. So, anything else? Nope. Okay, well, again, thank you very much. Come on over. I'll be over there for a few minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry Robin, once again. Keegan Water. So I think it's about time we keep this show moving. Is Ryan Serino here? Serrano, my bad. So you want to go up now? You want to take a break, get some food? Let's keep this train rolling. Let's keep this train rolling. All right, here we go.
My buddy and I were making wagers on whether or not I was speaking right now. All right, so today I was asked to come out and speak about something, and so something I've been discussing a lot with folks recently is this concept of ecology being a human right, and I think that's a lot of what I've been hearing so far from the previous speakers is this concept of things that we're entitled to by nature of our presence on Earth. What are we entitled to as people? What are our inalienable rights, the things that we cannot have taken from us and we cannot give away? What are the things that are innate to our being? And I think really deeply that ecology is something that all beings on Earth are entitled to. And when I think about ecology, I'm thinking about a balanced relationship with the place that we live. Ecology is the study of the place that we live, but a healthy ecology is having a healthy relationship with the place that we live and the places that we coexist with. So I don't feel like I'm going to convince anybody in this room. I'm going to presume that everybody already agrees with me. So what I actually want to do is just articulate this idea in a way that others can go forth and be able to share information with others about this idea. So the way I break it down is like this. Um, it starts with that concept of inalienable rights. This is I think, the premise of almost anytime you see people passionately defending or fighting something, whether it's their right to clean water or it's their right to grow hemp, whatever it is, there's that idea of it being our right, and that's the reason why we fight passionately over it. And so I want to propagate that idea for our ecology, because what I see when I'm living in the city, I live in Long Beach, and what I see is people who don't really have very much compassion for their environment, and I mean, frankly, they don't have a lot of compassion for themselves either. But that's a whole different topic. But I think that as we start to promote this idea of ecology being a right and ecology being a living thing that we're entitled to, then people will start to have more compassion for it. So one of the more recent, I guess in more recent history, somewhere that you could sort of use as a metaphor or an analogy for what I'm discussing is just thinking about the civil rights movement and what was that. And there's talk of what are people's inalienable rights with regard to being objectified and owned. And there was a point in history where we said, no, slavery is not okay explicitly, it's not okay, at least on an explicit legal level. People have an inalienable right to live free of bondage. And I think in the same way we can understand how that applies to having a healthy ecology. In a way, you can think of the unhealthy environment that's cultivated by industrial practice and commercial practices is a form of bondage to a degree, where we're being forced to submit ourselves to living in this unhealthy ecology. And it was nobody was representing us previously in history when those decisions were being made to cultivate that type of environment. So when I think about people who have no compassion for ecology, it's rooted in a certain ideology that starts with objectifying everything and diminishing the qualitative value of all living things. So we objectify places, we objectify regions and the living things in those regions, and we use terms like property and label them as property, and they're either property that's owned by the government, property that's owned by people, property that's owned by nobody, or property that's owned collectively by the whole world, which is like international places. And that is what we need to get rid of. We need to get rid of that idea of objectifying things, because it actually transitively passes down into all these other aspects of our culture. It's that same idea of objectifying living things on a plant level or on the forest level that translates to objectifying people in our day-to-day lives in the city. So when a woman is walking down the street and someone's yelling all sorts of derogatory things from their window, and they're objectifying that woman, that's rooted in that same ideology that says it's okay to objectify everything else. It's okay to objectify all living things, and therefore you're justified in infringing upon somebody's personal space like that. So I like to talk a lot about culture and cultural ideologies, and really think about it as about the idea of I guess you could say cultivating an enchantment with nature, being rooted in addressing cultural issues. So it is ideology, and it all comes down to ideologies that either promote one thing or another. So some ideologies promote this idea of objectification first and foremost, and and from there you get to profit ideology, where profit is based on an accumulation of objects, basically. Profit is the perceived accumulation of objects. But then other ideologies are different, and they will value at their core center life and wellness. And so from there you have these other sub-ideologies that are valuing the quality of living things, quality of living places, and things like that. And balance versus accumulation, or disproportionate accumulation versus harmonious balance. So I think of, if you wanted to take an example, we live in that environment where the profit ideology, the objectifying profit ideology, has been propagated over many generations, and that is what industrial society is. That's what post-industrial society is. It is that. It is the symptomatic, all of these negative social issues that we see, all these things that people are struggling and fighting for, are coming from, are symptoms of that objectifying culture. But meanwhile, we have a whole rich history of human existence that is that people don't really get to have much exposure to, that has actually been propagating that opposite ideology, which is, you know, rooted in the wellness of people and harmony and healthy ecology. And we see it a lot in indigenous cultures. So in indigenous cultures all over the world, there's certainly lots of variance in what they believe, but there's a lot of common ideas with regard to having an identity that's rooted in your bioregion. And suddenly when you feel like you identify with the place that you live and that your health is contingent upon the place that you live, when you understand that, you also have compassion for that place, and you have compassion for the other people who are also under the same perception. So when you're surrounded by people who are all identifying with your bioregion, in your bioregion, you have this harmonious cycle of compassion and all the things that come with that: less violence, less perception of scarcity, less fear-based aggression. And when you're in a place that doesn't have that, you have what we have in the city. You have violence. You have the perception of scarcity and all the crime that results from that. You have a lack of compassion for your environment, and you have all the pollution that comes with that. So part of why I think I was asked to talk about these things is that I'm also involved with various projects that I guess you could say try to address these issues. That's certainly personally my mission is to kind of cultivate a sense of enchantment with nature and with life in the people that I interact with. And I do that through my work and through the community organizing work that I do, and through even the work I do as a landscape designer. And what I really try to do is improve people's relationships with the place that they live. It's kind of interesting. I guess you could draw a lot of analogies to other aspects of people's lives. Like if you were to repair, for example, a relationships between people in a broken home, then suddenly those people in that family would have compassion for each other rather than resentment. And I think the same thing goes for the next strata or the next order of relationship, which is individuals with their environment. And once you start to repair people's understanding of the environment and make people actually appreciate the place that they live, then suddenly they have a broader spectrum of love to emit, so to speak. So they can shine their light a little bit more. And so what I do, I'm part of an organization called Foodscape Long Beach, and what we do is develop underused space in the city and grow food on it. and we share that food with our volunteers and with people in the communities where we're growing the food. And we really promote this idea of food being an inalienable right, kind of rooted in what I was saying earlier, which is that our environment is also our inalienable right, and laws are just totally arbitrary, illusory things that prevent us from accessing the environment. But if we had free access to the environment, we would also have free access to all of our food and all the other things that we need to live. And that's a protest against this idea of commodifying every living thing and everything that we need to live. And that's the paradigm that we live under currently. Everything we need to live is commodified. We're forced to labor, to earn money, to pay for the things that we need to live. Things that we otherwise call human rights under certain circumstances. To clarify that idea, you can look at disaster situations around the world, and in the event of a disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake that crushes lots of people, whatever it is, suddenly there's this kind of wide, how do you say it? Like broadly held view that that people are entitled to things like shelter or food or clean drinking water, and we dump all these resources into getting those people these things because why? It's a humanitarian crisis, and there are people over there. We need to make sure those people have what they're entitled to as humans. But meanwhile, and there's something about the quality of an acute disaster that plunges people into that mindset temporarily. But then slowly we come back into this paradigm, and it's not our right anymore to have shelter or food or clean drinking water, and nobody fights passionately. I shouldn't say nobody, because there's plenty of people out there that fight passionately about it. But there isn't a critical influence out there right now that actually reverses that circumstance. So I think that where was I going with that idea? So yeah, what I was getting at is that we need to get out of this idea of being okay with this with our ecological paradigm. We need to stop objectifying nature and recognize it as a qualitative living being, and that we coexist with, and that we require access to as a human right in order to be humans on Earth, be sentient, living, spiritual beings on Earth. And I think that if we were doing that, if we were fighting for that, and we're perceiving our ecology as a living thing, then yeah, we wouldn't see as many scarcity-related issues as we do today. I wanted to go back to that idea of like land-based identity and identifying with your bioregion. Because in addition to because we don't have that sense of identity in our culture, and because our culture rather promotes an objectified sense of identity, so we achieve identity through purchasing other commodities a lot in our culture. We purchase brand names, we purchase products, we purchase even like the color of the shirt that we want to wear that represents our identity. But meanwhile, there's still plenty of existing indigenous cultures who don't worry about anything like that, and they're strictly identifying with the bioregion in which they live. But you can look at identity issues on a broader level in our culture and really see that it's a confusing subject for a lot of people. Everything from how people understand sexual orientation to gender identity to even just the music people listen to is all this like confusing sense of identity that we all struggle with a lot as youth in our culture, because we aren't given that. And really what I think it is a big distraction. We grow up having really confused senses of identity and really struggling with some kind of basic things that a lot of other cultures don't have to struggle with in exactly the same way, because what they get to earlier in other cultures is that idea of having compassion for the earth. So all this to say that I think if we were to be working on this idea of ecology as something that we're entitled to and something that we need to protect more, we would also over time be kind of resolving a lot of other things that people struggle with that really shouldn't have to be issues in the first place. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't have to question any of those things. People shouldn't have to question their gender identity or what have you. I'm not saying that those are illegitimate struggles. But what I am saying is that people wouldn't create these discriminatory and arbitrary compartmentalizations of all these groups, and we wouldn't have the same degree of segregation that we would have with people prefixed on those what we should kind of think of as non-important to the degree of prejudice types of things. That we shouldn't value that to the degree of being passionately hateful toward those groups. Rather, we should be almost unconditionally accepting of whatever that is, and be focused on coexisting with our earth and living harmoniously, not living with boundaries. So I'm not feeling very articulate right now. I'm very tired. If there's any questions, I would love to discuss that. My work to finish that thought, I started that thought earlier. What I do is I'm an ecological landscape designer. I'm a permaculture designer. And my mission is to kind of improve people's relationships with the place that they live. And that's how I approach doing design work for people. So what I like to do is really look at what people's needs are, what people's interests are, and talk about that and kind of meet people where they're at and do work for them based on what's appropriate for their lifestyle and what will kind of pull them a little bit closer to being more compassionate for even their own home. And because I think it really does start with that, and it goes back to that think global, act local idea where you focus on people where they are and really get them to love themselves and love the place immediately around them. And over time, if they're in that pattern, that will ripple out further and further. And I really encourage other people to kind of think the same way. I've been involved with a lot of different kinds of activism and a lot of activist movements, everything from animal rights groups to radical environmentalist groups, and there's a lot of I have a lot of different ideas. I have a lot of my own ideas about those things, and I think they're all important in their own way. But where I've come to find my own calm sense of presence is just kind of working with people in smaller groups and working with people on a more sincere level, and really trying to inspire people to wander more in the place that they live rather than get stuck so in such a small range of focus in these lifestyles, because we spend our whole lives selling our labor to meet our needs when we could be spending our whole lives laboring and liberating to liberate ourselves. So I'm open to hearing some questions right now, and otherwise I'm happy to talk with people later on. But if you want to find out more about our organization, it's called Foodscape Long Beach, and we have several different projects going on right now. But this fall we'll be starting a bunch of new programs. To give you an idea of what we do, we have one lot in downtown Long Beach area where we're developing a food forest. It's a demonstration site so that people can have access to an abundant forest habitat in the city, whereas otherwise people would never have exposure to it, and you can't really cultivate compassion to something you've never seen before. So what I really like to have it there for is to actually bring people into it and have them be like, oh my gosh, look at all these animals, look at all these colors. I'm smelling all these things I didn't know existed. And suddenly it's like something I want to do more and more in my life. I want to come support this project. I want to come support the next one that you start up. And that's what we're trying to do with that project. We've developed this other program called Foodscape Your Lawn, where we're actually turning people's lawns into permaculture-inspired gardens. And we've done this pilot project back in the spring that we're looking to probably roll it out as a regular program in the fall. And so if you want to learn how to do landscaping even, just general landscaping work, because that work entails working on your irrigation systems and creating a viable environment for food production. That's the kind of program where we're going to be like knocking out lawns in 1 day or 2 days and turning them into food productive systems, so that if we are going to be using exorbitant amounts of water, at least it's producing something good for us. Another program we're working on is kind of a waste sequestration program where we are receiving a lot of waste now from different artisanal food producers in our region in Long Beach. So there's different coffee roasters and coffee shops. There's local cold press organic juicers and kombucha producers that are all bringing their organic waste products to our lot to be composted. And we're mitigating a lot of waste from the waste stream and diverting it into our food production rather than into our landfills where it doesn't really serve anyone. So yeah, we're on that tip, and yeah, I'm happy to hear any questions if anyone has them right now. So we usually have a monthly calendar that we release. This summer we have actually been restructuring internally and have just finished acquiring a 501c3 where we were operating under a fiscal agent before. And so we're a nonprofit. We're officially our own nonprofit now. And that's why I say this fall we're going to be rolling out these new programs. Another program, by the way, that we've set up is this internship with Cal State Long Beach, and students at Cal State Long Beach who are in the Environmental Science and Policy Department and the Geography Department can actually receive college credit to work for us and do projects for us. So if you know people who go to that school who are in those departments or who are looking to go to college and are interested in permaculture or ecology or just the environment in general, tip them off on that, because we're trying to develop a really powerful program. To answer your question, we don't have any major events planned right now. We usually do like a monthly like pizza party at our lot because we have a cob oven that we've built there, and we crank out really great pizzas and use veggies from the lot on them. So if you catch up with us online, you'll find out when those next ones are going to be. But currently we don't have any major events going on. We do put on a lot of workshops that are related to permaculture and homesteading skills and various discussions related to social awareness and ecological awareness. But the easiest answer is that we have weekly volunteer opportunities at our lot in downtown Long Beach. It's just like a couple blocks away from the Blue Line. The 5th Street exit is like right there. And so it's really easy to get to by transit. And we're just there 3 days a week right now, every Thursday and Sunday morning from 9:30 to 12, and every Monday evening from 5 to 6:30. And volunteers just kind of come and hop in and do work with us on the lot. They work on managing the compost. They work on weeding or planting or propagating seeds. Whatever needs to be done is what you're hopping into that day. And volunteers get to share the yield with us. We have a lot of fruit trees. We have a lot of different herbs and vegetables. We have a pond. It's a stagnant water pond that's totally clean and mosquito-free. We manage it with plants. We have a cob oven and cob construction benches and a lot of cool stuff to check out if you're interested in getting into permaculture. Yeah, so that's there for anyone that's interested in just learning even basic stuff about how to garden. We want to be a resource for people and a kind of a leading source for information and education in our region, because that's not present. It's not present for any of the youth in our schools. There's hardly even any school gardens in Long Beach, and that's another thing that we're looking at doing, because there's no organization that's really facilitating school garden programming or school garden education in Long Beach. We're looking at stepping into that space also, but we do require more volunteer presence to do that. But yeah, come visit us we call it the Chestnut Lot, and it's really close to the 710 freeway on Chestnut Avenue and 7th Street, near the 5th Street exit on the Metro Blue Line. Yeah, well, I've actually worked at a charter school in Long Beach teaching garden curriculum, and so we have stuff written up. And there's plenty of other models for it out there. So it's actually a really easy to replicate program. If anyone is feeling ambitious and wants to do it themselves, I'm happy to hook you up with all the info you need. But because it's out there, tons of people are doing it, and but I don't want to make it sound easy, because the hard part is getting through bureaucracy. You have to know, the bureaucratic jujitsu of like navigating all the authoritative figures and legal liability things that that prohibit your access to teaching young people and enchanting them with nature. So, but there's plenty of, once you do get through all those barriers, then there's ways to do it and ways to make it happen. It's all about finding the funding, finding the support from the schools and the teachers, and then having the energy and the capacity to carry it out. But yeah, we're really interested in like training people to do that, and that's another thing that we're interested in using those Cal State Long Beach students to do as their internship. So they'll spend a semester teaching young people at an elementary school how to play in the dirt. Okay, so and our website is actually about to relaunch, but so if you check it out right now, it's pretty outdated, but it's called foodscapelb.org, and you can check us out on Facebook also, Foodscape Long Beach, just like it sounds, Foodscape, it's one word. And yeah, follow us on there. There's lots of photos of what we do at the lot and what we have growing there, and lots of photos of happy people there. So if you want to have a happier time in life, it's also a good place to go to for that. If you're struggling through whatever, I find that just being in the garden is really great for remediating any kind of negative emotions. But yeah, checking us out on Facebook. Probably, I'm guessing in the next few weeks, we're going to launch our new website, and we've already built it. We're just finishing filling out the content now. But yeah, that's pretty exciting. And then we're probably going to have some kind of party, because we've been really quiet over the last 3 months. But yeah, you can also, if you wanted to catch up on what we have been doing and the kinds of events that we put on and workshops that we do, there's lots of that info that you can find on Facebook or on the website also. Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, well, I'm excited to see other folks are going to be talking about permaculture later on today. And I think permaculture is really, it is a life science based on it's a design protocol for solving problems, solving problems in every aspect of our lives. And one of the biggest things is just having even the smallest degree of security in urban regions, because we really don't have that. And all of our commodified needs come through really volatile lines of transit, and it's really insecure. So again, when I talk about having compassion for the earth and perceiving our ecology as a human right, I'm talking about that exactly, because it's restricted by this really temperamental infrastructure that could be knocked out with a natural disaster, for example. We are really being put into a dangerous situation living in the city without any real guarantees that our food's going to be here next week. It could be any number of things that are totally arbitrary, like people, stop. They don't feel like selling gas anymore, so they're just gonna stop. And now the food can't get to us, or an earthquake comes and shakes up all the old freeways that our food comes traveling on, and suddenly food can't get to us anymore. Things like that. So those are important things to think about. And when you really start to value the place that you live and what it can provide for you and what it should be providing for you and what our right should be to grow what we need and what we want, where in the place that we live. Even like the brother talking about cannabis earlier, something as simple as that. It's really ignoring what might be culturally appropriate for someone, and it should be somebody's human right to determine what they grow in the place that they live. Yet that's arbitrarily restricted from us by laws that were created for, again, that profit ideology. Those laws are all arbitrary to people who ultimately are coming from a place of profit ideology that wants to objectify all of us and all the things that we need to live. Anyway, thank you. My name is Ryan Serrano like the pepper, and you can find me online or whatever also, and I'm always happy to share information. I always respond to emails if people have questions about whatever. I'm not very discretionary about who I respond to, so I respond to everyone. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. That was sweet. How's everyone feeling here? You get some food? You notice we got some food over there? Myrrh Ranch. We got a bunch of vegetables from Sarah here, and she made a great meal. Make sure you get at that. What's up? Good job. Also want to say special thanks to Tiffany Fabricius, is that how I say it? Fabricius, for bringing some art. If you haven't seen that, she's got some of her pieces in back, bringing some live art contribution, bringing some flavor to the space, Everyone good? We keeping this rolling? We got hula hoop demonstrations going on soon. Get moving around, get flexible. I think up next we got Michael Ray. You ready? Michael Ray's got some enlightening info for you people. Once again, this is streaming, so if you want to let anyone know, you are at Win Within Sangha. You can look on our Facebook, and it has the link there to watch this all happening right now. It's great. I love technology. Let's do this, Mike. Big hand for Michael Ray.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi. It's kind of like The Price is Right. They called me down. So my name is Michael Ray de Los Angeles, or de Los Angeles for those of you that are having a little trouble with the accent, or maybe need a little more practice with it. Hi to the person who's out there in video land watching this, watching what we're doing here. My name is Michael Ray, and Philip, if you could just pull up the PowerPoint one. I'm going to give you just a quick insight as to what we're going to cover. We're going to do some grounding exercises to sort of bring our tribe together, bring the people together, followed by 2 quick presentations, which will be about 15 minutes apiece. We'll have some group dialogue, some discussion, some feedback, and then we'll finish a little bit about my services and what I do as well. That said, how are y'all doing? Ooh, that's like half asleep. If you can hear me, clap once. All right, that's like sort of slow, sleepy clap. If you can hear me, clap twice. All right, that's like sort of getting together almost. We're like borderline sync together. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. All right, I think that's fair, right? We're sort of shaking it up. So this is the Michael Ray de Los Angeles Ecological Literacy Paradigm Shifting and You workshop. For our grounding exercise, we're going to inhabit that space behind us. If you just take a minute to look over there, everybody. Ooh. That's where we'll be in just a quick second. In fact, we can actually go over there right now. All right, so All right. Whew. We're back. Grab some food. Thank you, Muir Farms. Thank you, Win Within Sangha, for having us. And yeah, so as you're finding your way back to the center, back towards our sort of forum, if you will, we're going to start the presentation. Get comfy, pull up your sandals, get some water, and so this is the, and right there is cool. We'll do this one first and then we'll switch over. So this is the Michael Ray, the Los Angeles Ecological Literacy Paradigm Shifting and You. We've sort of taken part of the interactive part, the you part. So now that we're all together and on the same page, let's flip it over. We've got these are a list of the services that I offer. This is a part of an excerpt of a larger 10-week workshop, laboratory, but also additionally these are some of the things that I do: private tutoring, graphic design, and video and photography. So email, contact information, and website is right there. So it's also over there. But let's flip to the next slide. Oh, so the first question is that where we're going to start off is, what is a myth? And so I'm going to just open it up to all of you all. What is a myth? Okay, an unproven tale. You can't fight City Hall. That is a myth. That is the story we've created. What else? The Loch Ness Monster. So I'm going to give you a little background. Let's pull up the next slide. A myth is the story or stories we tell ourselves about our place in the world. And this really differs. This varies depending on the person or persons that you ask this question to, meaning what are the stories that we're telling. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of myths that we've sort of established, and these are our next slide. These are what we know as creation myths. These are things like Genesis, which presents, from the biblical stance, it's the thing which, within Genesis, we get a sort of hierarchy where we are the stewards, or Homo sapien is the steward of the animals and the land. That's would be Genesis. Another creation myth, and there's variables, and like I said, it depends on who you ask. What is what is the story that we're telling ourselves? So if we go to a First Nation people, if we go to the indigenous American population, they'll bring up something like Turtle Island, which Turtle Island, in that story, the creation is a co-species, multiple species, in which we have the turtles and the beavers and the Homo sapiens all are able to speak to one another. And so in our modern world, that's co-evolution. And so we get things like we can understand our dogs and our cats, right? Yes? How many of you got dogs? What's your name again? Jeanette. Jeanette? Yes. When your dog needs to go outside, what does it do? How does that look? Like, what happens? And are you able, and you're at this point, you're able to read that, correct? So that would be an example of coevolution, where we're able to communicate and have intercommunication with our animals and with other species on this planet. Moving forward, let's go to our modern scientific stories. These are the anthrocentric stories. These are the stories that say there is no life without Homo sapien. There is no life without human. So that's one form of belief. The modern scientific story, myth, there's also the ecocentric, which the ecocentric focuses on the larger planet, which says there is no life without the planet. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. There is no life without the planet. Does that make sense? So the ecocentric says we're part of a whole. As Homo sapiens, we are part of a whole. The anthrocentric says we're at the top of the food chain. Lastly, I just want to toss in one more, and then we're going to move over to the presentation. This is a little bit more in depth and give us a little bit more gusto and potatoes and root vegetables for our discussions. So the capitalist creation myth is the belief that we are what we consume. And with the rise of corporations like Monsanto, like Coca-Cola, like, give me one. Do you know one? Fiji Water. What else? Which one? Nestle, yes. So, which one? Monsanto, yes. And so these have an effect on our very being, because if we subscribe to the belief that we are what we consume, then what are we consuming? Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Yes, so next Prezi. So we're going to just do a quick history lesson and really understand what it is that we consume. This style of life, this modern way that we live, started with agriculture, where we were able to shift into stationary animals. We were able to sort of take space. We were able to stop moving around with the seasons. So this is where we're going to go. Brief question. Put up the next one. Philip, there we go. Anybody know what agriculture is? Could any of you define that? Industry of food? What else? Okay. Yes. Centralized food, okay. That's almost a dirty joke. You got it. Dirt. Yeah. So what's that? Let's move it forward and see what they have to say. This is what Merriam-Webster has to say. I'll just give you a minute to read it. And so with this, the fascinating thing that I found, and there's variations depending on what your dictionary is that you're looking at. There's variations on the word agriculture. This is one of the more fascinating ones that I found, which includes the preparation and marketing of the products. So we're no longer looking at food as an energy, but more of a commodity. So let's move forward. This way of life, this sort of way of being, started about 10,000 years ago. more or less. You get a couple of different numbers within a couple of thousand years, but this is a generally agreed upon number. So it's about 10,000 years old. Back then we were looking at foraging, so what we were, yep, exactly, we were looking at foraging, and so we were not only moving with the seasons, but we're also moving with what we enjoyed and what we were able to eat the easiest. So let's see what was good for us to eat, what we were having accessible. The things that were accessible were the things like the blueberries, the berries, the leaves, these things that we have in our daily lives, our chards. All of those were wild at one point. So let's move it forward. Up until that, this is what we were doing. We were hunting, we were gathering. Let's move it forward. What brought us out of that was the ability to herd and the ability to communicate with animals and be able to read them. We took on that stewardship, if you will. So this continued on all the way up. The stewardship that we have continued all the way up until the times of John Muir, which I'm willing to bet the Muir farm is named after John Muir. He was a sheep herder. This is what modern industrial, like the non-industrial agriculture looks like. We have something where we're harmonious with the land. We're not exceeding the carrying capacity. We're not overburdening the land and creating an abundance so much so that we tip the natural scales. So what happens now, the question is, what happens when we begin to tip the scales? We have large-scale production, and not only do we have large-scale production of single crops, monoculture, but we have to fabricate and create large machinery to create those crops, or to harvest those crops, which not only applies to plant life, but also to non-human nature life, such as animals and chickens, hens, steer, all of those are also names that we give to food. It's not a chicken, its actual name is a hen. We apply the name chicken because we see it as an object of consumption. So not only are we having an effect on the lives of the animals and the plants, but we're also having an effect on the lives of the people as well. Last I checked, and you can, hold on, go back one more. Last I checked, we're looking at a 50, I think it's about 25 cents per barrel. So each time as the workers are getting a barrel, they're bringing it to the large-scale truck, the large industrial agricultural truck. That's 25 cents. And so each box weighs, X amount, and you can imagine how many trips that is going to take in order to make that single dollar. So you can move that forward. If you'd like to know more about that, I recommend the film Imokali, which talks about the marginalized people, the immigrant population in Florida. And so moving forward, in the 1960s, Rachel Carlson brought about onto the forefront the harmful effects of genetically modified substances in our food streams. And so she was looking at things like DDT, and so she brought that, and eventually it was banned for usage. Today we're looking at other chemicals that are being sprayed onto our crops, onto our food sources, and this is the method that they're using. They're using crop dusters because it's easier to go apply a a plane overhead than it is to bring someone down in the field, because a plane can do it so much faster than a human can with 2 feet. So moving it forward. This is the type of water consumption that goes into it. And so for these large-scale productions of food, we need large-scale production of water sources. And so we need to dam up rivers and streams in order to create the livelihood, this lifestyle that we're leaving. And so this is about what it costs. This is the Rainbow Dam. You can bring it up. That's just one dam. If you can imagine, there are dams like these all over the world. Some of them are in a state of some of them have affected our indigenous population and the people surrounding those areas. The Klamath Dam, the Nile River, all of these places, the great rivers of our world, are slowly drying up because of mass production like this. So that's the dam. Beautiful dam. So this is the question. Can you read that by any chance? Can you see that? Yes? No? No. It says, so what does this all mean, and ultimately what does it have to do with me? Let's find out. Ultimately, I really want to leave on the positive note, is that we do have a choice. We have cooperatives and people who are out there on the front lines bringing this sort of consciousness back into our awareness, reminding us the hazards of these genetically modified foods, of these industrial lifestyles. And so we can also, when we know the people that are bringing in our food sources, we can trust our source. And so ultimately that's where we want to get to, where we know where our fruits, vegetables, all of our commodities that we use, we want to know where our water is coming from. We have that innate human right to have clean water, clean air, and clean food. What do you think about that? Do we have that right? Yes? Okay, we should. Exactly. And so this is about empowering. What can we do to empower? And so be a conscious consumer. And that's really what it is about. Be aware of where you place your dollars, where you place your finances and investments. So that means looking at your packaging. What is your packaging saying? Is it